Everyone. Obviously, our finest have departed, and I'm talking about our wives, our sisters. They have congregated in the fellowship hall. My wife will be teaching that class tonight, and I apologize for being a few minutes delayed. Brother Leon, Mr. Leon, I met earlier this year in Jackson, Missouri. Connected with me when I was there. I collect knives, Remington knives, specifically bullet knives, and I've collected them for years. We really connected on that. His wife's a member of the church. He is not, and he had some knives he wanted to give me. He drove from Jackson, Missouri, down to White Bluff, and he just met me in the parking lot, and he says, "I want you to have these." And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time discussing, just talking to Leon. I called one of his elders, David Selvik. I said, "Brother David, you'll never guess who's coming." Leon he said, "All the way to Tennessee." I said, "Yes, to give me some knives." And he said, "Rob," he says, you be praying for Leon, because I believe I'm going to baptize him tomorrow. And I'm so excited to know. I said, "Please keep me informed of that." And so there's a lot of good going on. Brother Jerry, are you upstairs? Wave at me, Jerry. Jerry's so kind. Kyle Butt, through Apologetics Press, has donated 100 of those Bibles, Apologetics Press study Bibles, to our school. We'll be using those for a campaign in March. Jerry had 100 of them, and so instead of paying the shipping, Jerry brought 10 boxes of Bibles, placed them in my vehicle tonight. And so this has been just a blessing to be here at White Bluff, and I'm thankful for this church. I want to tell you about what happened this morning. Daniel and Brant and Doug and Shamron, we met about 6 o'clock this morning together, and those aren't preacher hours, but we can get up that early if we need to. And so we gathered around a table, and we went over the curriculum, the training curriculum of how to implement this at the congregational level. We granted them access into the curriculum this afternoon, and the materials they'll be using when we walk out the door to help set this up and get this moving forward. And so we have a lot of aftercare. I believe our aftercare is better than our before care, our pre-care. We have a lot of work that we've done to try to help churches when we depart. But I spent 2 hours with these men. They're godly men. They love the truth. They love the Lord. From Brent, who obviously is the youngest, to I don't know, is Doug the oldest, 71 years old, he said. And he said he prayed that God would light a fire in his life, the last, portion of his ministry. And he said, "God, let me end my ministry, however many years that is, with a fire." And he says, and God has answered that prayer. And Doug is ready to start that teaching and preaching. And Brant he sees things. He's got good vision. So impressed with this young man. I know he's only 30 years old, but he has some wisdom that most 30-year-olds do not have. And I am thankful to spend time with him. Daniel's got such a zeal, life. When I'm around Daniel, I think he could power a light bulb. And I really do. And so, Daniel, you've been a blessing to my life. And Shamron, we appreciate the friendship with your family. Your family, your daughter, they spent the last 2 days feeding us and hiking with us and just talking with us. And that's been a refresher to our soul and spirit. And I can tell you that we love you. I posted on my Facebook page today. It's hard to explain how I can be with brethren only for 72 hours, but love them so much. And I love you. And I want to see you in heaven. And I want to be there with you. And that's what this is all about. We want to take as many people to heaven as we can. And so let's pray together. Let's pray that this effort that is starting right here with this group of men and then permeating through this church will result in people in White Bluff going to heaven who are not going to heaven today. Let's pray that it results in some of our children and our family being brought to Christ, being restored to the cross, and because that's what life is about. And I'm so thankful. John Jones met me with lunch. He's the preacher at McEwen. He said, "Boy, I sure would like to connect with that good White church." So I connected him with the Shamron today. He made a statement to me. He says, "Rob," he said, "a couple of weeks ago, we had 8 men, young men, walk in our church building." And he said, "I'd never seen them. I asked him who they were. They're linemen. As you might know, there's a school in McEwen for linemen, to train linemen. And it's, my understanding, one of the best schools in the nation. In fact, these young men had come from Maryland and Pennsylvania, these 8 men. And they had traveled to go to school in McEwen. Can you imagine? Because they say they have one of the highest hiring rates when school is graduated. And so these young men come down, and there's been some events in our country. The assassination of Charlie Kirk and has awakened a spirit in a lot of our young men. You don't have to agree or disagree politically, but you can know that he pointed people to Jesus. He said, the Bible's the answer. And these young men said, I'm going to church because Charlie said that's what I should do. Those young men had never been to church. And they walked in that church building, 8 of these young men. And John said that he sat down with them. He invited them to lunch. They had lunch together. And they said, young men, would y'all like to know more about the Bible? And they said, that's what we're here for. And they've been in Bible study with those 8 young men for the last 2 weeks. They've been going through Back to the Bible. He says, Rob, he says, if God blesses us with the time, these young men are going to obey the gospel. And there is good happening in our country. I've been speaking about it. I've been sensing it. I read an article this morning from considered a prestigious newspaper. They did a poll, and across this country, church membership has been up the last 2 Sundays. More people are going to church right now than have been going to church in a very long time. In some places, church attendance was up 80%. The average is a 15% increase. And so let's not dismiss the climate. Let's not ignore the culture. Let's not be blind and shut our eyes to what's going on around us. Let's, for whatever reason people are seeing, we need to get back to God. We need to get back to church. We need to respect the scriptures. We need to love Jesus. And so that right there message preaches. And I hope and pray that we as a church can be looking for these visitors, looking for some of these young men who are realizing that there's a better way. There's a better way in life than just living for yourself. There's a better answer out there. There's a better God than yourself. And there's a God of heaven who loves you. There's a word that will guide you. And what an opportunity. Brethren, I haven't been this hopeful in this nation. I can't remember since I've had this much hope. As I look at this younger generation, as they're searching for answers, and they're looking for something that is substantive, something that is foundational, something they can hold on to. And what a time when we, as older men, need to set that example and show them what a godly father looks like, and show them what a godly husband is, and show them what leadership in the church is. And that starts tonight. And the very reason that you're here, when you can be watching a ball game, when you can be going through and tilling garden, getting it ready for the winter, or whatever it is that you would like to do, but you sacrifice tonight. You're here not because your wife drug you, because you love God and you love your neighbor. And you want to learn how to practice congregational evangelism. I want everybody to take their Bibles tonight to Ephesians chapter 4. I want us to begin here tonight as we introduce our topic, Ephesians chapter 4. And here is Paul. He's giving instructions to the church at Ephesus. And of course, we might say that in the New Testament, the church is in her infancy. She's just been born. Acts 2. There are developmental stages in the church. She gives birth in Acts 2. Obviously, in Acts 2, she's not full grown. She's missing some pieces. There's no question about that. There are no elders in Acts 2. They're apostles. God knew that. He sets up those apostles to be leaders of that church. And there's no written New Testament, but there were inspired prophets that can provide that miraculous gifts, that can help in that immature state. Paul talks about that childish state, 1 Corinthians 13. He called it a childish state. As the church is relying upon those miraculous gifts because they do not have the New Testament written word of God. But as the church is developing and maturing, so she's going through the infant stage, and then, of course, you got the terrible twos and the toddler stage. And just think about the development of the church, right? Because she doesn't become full grown overnight. It takes time. And so as we're developing, Paul, as he writes these letters, he's helping the church develop. And there's something he says in Ephesians 4 that relates directly to what we're trying to do in this, relates directly to the vision this eldership has for White Bluff. And I want us to focus on it. It's in the 4th chapter. And in that 4th chapter, as he reminds us of the 7 ones, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and the unity of the Spirit, the bond of peace. And as he says, now listen, there were some gifts, a measure of gift given to help this take place, these miraculous gifts endowed. But then he says something in verse number 11. He gave some, here it is. This is where we're beginning. He gave some to be apostles. So the early church had apostles. They needed apostles. I'm not an apostle. You're not an apostle. There's an apostle anywhere in this world. And anybody that claims to be an apostle cannot do so by the authority of Scripture because they don't meet the qualifications. There are no apostles. But the early church had them. They needed them. They helped them. And he said some prophets. No prophets today. Okay, that was an inspired office. They needed those prophets. Once again, they didn't have the New Testament Scripture. Look at this next word. Some evangelists. Paul says we need evangelists in the church. I've heard it said, I was only 18 years old. I was up in Ohio. I preached on the Great Commission, and a man came up to me, and Brent, when you told me this tonight, it reminded me of this story. This man came up to me and says, now, son, I know you're excited about evangelism and the Great Commission, but don't you know that was just given to the apostles? That does not apply to us today. Have you heard that before? And I was taken back by his statement. He said, that was just to the apostles. Now, I'm going to ask this question. Is that just to the apostles? Are we just talking about apostles? Was Philip an apostle? Was Barnabas an apostle? Was Silas an apostle? Was John Mark an apostle? Because all of these men are evangelists. And what Paul's telling us here in Ephesians 4 is that you need evangelists in your church. Now look at this. Please stay with me here. This is important. Some pastors, we've got those. You've got pastors in your audience tonight. I can see a pastor there. I see pastors here. You see them. They're among you. These pastors, Brother Brent is out there. He's a pastor, right? I'm not a pastor. A pastor's an elder. Watch this now, verse number 11. And some teachers. We got teachers in the audience tonight. Now, why? Why does the church need these various job descriptions? Here it is. For the completion or perfecting of the saints. I believe a more accurate translation, and I love the King James, would be to the equipping of the saints. It's to the equipping of the church. The church needs these offices to equip the church to help her be full, all right, for the perfecting or the edifying of the body of Christ. So if you want a complete church, you got to have evangelists. You got to have evangelists. Now, we've got elders in the place of apostles, okay? A little different authority, but yet elders rest on that apostolic authority. All their authority comes from the apostles. No more. It doesn't exceed it. Now, stay with me here till we come into the unity of the faith. You want unity in faith, you need evangelists. The knowledge of the Son of God. And notice the perfect man, full grown. If you want to have the church be mature, full grown, what do you need? You need evangelists. And he says, to be the full measure, the fullness of Christ. That you be no more tossed to and fro by the sleight and cunning craftiness of men. You don't want to be fickle. You need evangelists in your church to ground you, to help you understand the fundamentals that we can teach others. And when we evangelize, we speak the truth in love that we may grow thereby. There's so much here in Ephesians 4, but I want to make this point. And I'm going to choose my words carefully. Brother, when I look at the Church of Christ today, I see a lot of job descriptions. I see involvement ministers, community life ministers. I see young professional ministers. And we got a lot of titles. I'm not sure where these titles came from. I grew up in the church. My mother was a church secretary. I grew up running through the pews of the auditorium. I went to church every day. I can remember playing communion. Have you ever played communion when you were a young boy? I practiced song leading. I practiced preaching because my sister and I, we would run through the Bible classes. I don't remember young professional ministers. I'm not saying they're sinful. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not even implying that. I don't remember involvement ministers. I don't remember community life ministers. I don't remember all the titles we have for preachers today. Where are the evangelists? Where are they? Now, again, I'm not against those titles. If you want to hire one and say, focus on this, hey, that's fine. Give him whatever title you want. But I want to know where the evangelists are. I want to know where the churches are hiring an evangelist. And here's what we do. We say, well, Brother Doug, you're the minister. Brother Doug, you're the preacher. Brother Doug, you're the evangelist. And we put everything on one man. I've never liked the title, I'm the minister. Do you know who the ministers are? You. Everyone in this church is a minister. We're all ministers. We're ministering servants. And so, you know where the evangelists are? They should be among us. Evangelists, men that train, men that teach, men that focus on helping a church reach their community and reach their fellow man and fulfill the Great Commission. I'm just going to call out. I'm calling churches back. Every church, I talk to elders. I said, the next time it comes to staff, the next time you look at adding people, subtracting people, I would like to put this bug in your ear. Consider creating an evangelist. Hire an evangelist. Some men in there that focus on your community while we're sending people all over the world. I love Tanzania. I love the Pacific Islands. I love Robert Martin. I love Jamaica. I love the great Andrew Conley with the Tanzania. I love those men. I love white love. I met with a preacher not long ago, and he says, Rob, I'm considering stepping out of ministry. I said, why? He said, I used to be in mission work, and then the brethren loved to come to church. The brethren loved to sow the seed. The brethren loved to teach their neighbors. I love to go to church. He said, Rob, he says, you realize how hard it is just to get someone to come back on Sunday night? He said, I'm tired. I'm tired of having to drag them. I'm tired of having to pull them. I'm trying to have to force them. He said, I want to go somewhere where the people want to be there. I want to go somewhere where people want to teach. And I'm thinking of going back overseas. I had a heartfelt conversation with that man. I said, oh, brother, I want you first to know I love you. And my words may hurt. I said, but I want you to hear me loud and clear. The greatest mission field in the world right now is the United States of America. And if we don't get some of our men to stay in this country and preach the gospel here and help our churches learn how to evangelize, there's not going to be a church left. Some of our churches have decided this old model don't work anymore, and they're moving ever so slightly left. And even in your own area, there are churches, and it bothers me greatly to see the direction they're going, and they continue going that direction. Rubel Shelley did not become Rubel Shelley overnight. He was once a faithful preacher. I can remember growing up in the church, Doug, and I can remember those old preachers. I was just a boy. And they said, brethren, we're drifting. Brethren, stop drifting. We don't need to drift to grow. We don't need to become a community church. We don't need all. Do you know what we need? We need evangelism. We need to get back to a time when your parents and your grandparents were just so involved in bringing people to Christ. It's time for you to do it now. And it's not too late, brother. It's not too late. It's considered one of the greatest speeches in world history. His name is Winston Churchill. The war effort was going poorly. The morale of his people had never been lower. The bombing raids from the German Luftwaffe had come over the great Battle of Britain, pounding the cities, London, every night. The people would go into their bomb shelters and wait it out as the sirens would rage and as the prayers were offered and the children would cry and the wives would shake and they would wait for it to be over, hoping they would survive. Night after night after night. Neville Chamberlain thought he could negotiate with Adolf Hitler, and he thought somehow he would become a good Adolf, and somehow we could make a peace treaty, and somehow he would stop tyranny. But his efforts failed, his confidence. But there was a man that was willing to stand up and speak uncomfortable words, call out the politicians, call out the country. One of the things that Winston Churchill said in that rousing speech before the Parliament was, he who fails to plan is planning to fail. My fellow countrymen, we have no plan and we're going to lose this war. Well, they elected him prime minister. And the tide of the war began to change. One of his first jobs was to help the morale of the people rise because they needed soldiers. And to get soldiers, you don't want to hunt them down. You don't want to chase them through the streets. You need those young men running to you, saying, sign me up. My grandfather, both of them fought in World War II. You didn't have to hunt them down. They were hunting down the recruiter, and if they had to cheat to get in, they would. Because they wanted to defend their country. They said, Mr. Churchill, Mr. Prime Minister, our people are scared. We're having a hard time just meeting quotas. He said, send me to the military academy. You put me in front of those young men. Mr. Prime Minister, are you sure you want to speak to them? He said, you put me right in front of them. And they took the Prime Minister. They put him right in front of the largest audience of young soldiers and young recruits. He said, let me speak to them. It's considered one of the greatest speeches ever given. Never give in. And those young troops came to their feet and they applauded, and you could feel the momentum and the energy was palatable in that place. Some consider him one of the greatest leaders of the world because he turned. Brethren, we need some leadership in our churches right now. We need elders to take a stand. We need preachers to stand up. We need men to lead. We need men to get up and arise because, brethren, if we don't arise, evangelize, and baptize, we're going to fossilize. Our clock is running. But we serve a great God tonight. A great God. A God who has at many times throughout history has proven himself to be able to deliver victories with the smallest of armies. Thin them out, he said. We don't need this many. But God, there's a giant army on the other side. Thin them out. We don't need this many. Your numbers won't win. If we're faithful to God and we do what he says, brother, the victory is the Lord's. The battle is the Lord's. He is King of kings and Lord of lords. And so it's my conviction tonight that if we will rest upon those statements and believe what he says and do what he asks, God will bless you. But for this church to survive and grow, it starts with men. Men who are willing to be men. My daughter asks me all the time, Dad, where are the men? She says, where are they? Where are the men? Where are the men who will put their toys down? Where are the men who will make sacrifice? Where are the men who will take responsibility in their homes? Where are the men who will step up and lead in church? Where are the men who will go to elders and say, you can count on me. Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it. Where are the men willing to be Christian soldiers? I pray God they're right here tonight, regardless of your age or physical ability. I pray God it starts right here. So if I was going to present a plan to a church, and if I was just going to give you a 10,000-foot view, what do you need to do, church? What does it require for us to win this war? How can we win? Well, I'm going to make this as simple and as plain as possible. I'm going to treat you tonight like soldiers. You went to boot camp. I know the first thing that happens at boot camp. I know what happens. You're going to walk in there, and the first thing they're going to do is equip you. There's a sergeant out there, and he's in charge of all the uniforms. He has to give an account to every single uniform. He's in charge of all the equipment, all the rifles, all the bullets. He's supposed to count everything he's got. And we're going to make sure that we put on every soldier what is needed to win the war. Brethren, it's about time that we procure our equipment. I was at a church this year. The elders, good people, and I don't want you in any way to perceive my statements as demeaning because I love them. But they said, Brother Rob, we've got something to show you. We're so proud of this. And they walked me outside, and he said, you smell that? And I said, man, it smells like oil. He said, it's Rob, we just did it. Look at it. It's a massive parking lot. And he said, man, it's asphalt 6 inches thick. I mean, we put an extra coat in. He said, man, Rob, he said, we spent $250,000 to do it. I said, brethren, in that meeting, I said, you need some evangelism equipment. Now, Rob, I don't know if we better look at this first. What kind of money are we talking about? Now, we'll spend $10,000 in India. We'll spend $250,000 blacktopping our parking lot. But we won't procure the equipment for our church members. Here's one thing I know. If we don't equip you, if we don't put the tools in your hand, I'm not talking about Doug. I'm talking about you, brother. I'm talking about you. We got to put stuff in your hand. We got to make sure you got your uniform. We got to make sure you got stuff that you can use. My first advice to every church is procure your equipment. We need Bibles. We need lots of Bibles. I wouldn't have made that statement in 1974 when I was born. That statement wasn't needed. Just about every American had one, if not two Bibles. Brethren, do you know there's a growing percentage of people in this nation, they don't have Bibles. They have no Bibles. We have a whole generation that's being raised right now, and the vast majority of them have never seen a Bible, touched a Bible, read a Bible. That's the first time that's ever happened in this nation. We need tools like back to the Bible. Does it matter? Believe the Bible. We need evangelism tools. We got to put them in the hands of our people. We got to let them hold them and use them and work them. We got to train them how to use it. We need materials to bring people, to keep people, for new converts. But we've got to procure the equipment. If we don't procure our equipment, then there's nothing we can do. Number two, place it out there where people can get it. Make it highly visible. Don't lock it in an office. Don't put it in the filing cabinet. I was in a church one day, and I was there early. And I said, brethren, I said, I got a question. I said, if I was a member here and I had a Bible study with my neighbor, to equip me to do the Bible study. Oh, yes, preacher, we knew you were coming. We were prepared. I said, okay. So they took me down this long hallway, turning on all the lights. We get to the end of the hallway, and there was a door. They said, preacher, it's in here. Of course, it was locked. We couldn't get in. And finally, we found a key to get us in that room. And we get in the room, and he said, preacher, they're in here somewhere. And we're looking around. He said, oh, they're in the cabinet. Of course, don't worry, it was locked. And now we got to find the key again. We can't get in there. And we finally get into this locker, and he pulls out back to the Bibles, and I just so happen to have some sets right here. And, he said, preacher, he said, that's what we'd use. I said, brother, I want to know why the materials that your members need to teach their neighbor the gospel are locked in a room and locked in a locker. He said, well, brother, we were afraid someone might get them. President, isn't that the point? Don't we want them to get them? Why are we locking our materials in a room and not giving them access for the church? Why? Let me make a suggestion. Why don't we do this? Why don't we go and, let's see if I can get here real quick. And I want to show you, well, that's the wrong PowerPoint. Maybe I can go forward. Brother, can you get me to the congregational lesson? Why don't we put a table out in the foyer and put evangelism material on and allow the members to have whatever it is they want? Why don't we procure the equipment, number one, place it in a highly visible place, number two, kind of like this. And we just put a table out there and say, okay, we're going to put you take as many muscle and a shovel as you want. You take as many back to the Bibles as you want. You take as many, doesn't matter. You take as many Bibles as you can handle. You take those tools and you use them. You don't need to ask, you don't need to check them out. You don't need to put in a special request. We don't need to unlock the locker. We don't need to get into the library. We're just going to put them out there, and that's called an evangelism table. At one time, these were prevalent in our churches. And our members would take Jewel Miller, open Bible study, back to the Bible. They used to go wherever they needed. And for some reason, we've started putting it up. And we start getting rid of those things. We don't need those things anymore. We got our phones. Brother, I've been doing Bible studies for 30 years. All right? You're never going to find a replacement for printed material. I understand your iPad's good. Your phone is helpful, but I'm telling you, you put it in their hand, you walk them through it. There's no replacement for that, just like they can't replace you for virtual people. We need to put an evangelism table in our foyers, and we need to equip it. We need to make sure our members have access. Our young people need access. Our older people need access. Number 3, we need to train our people how to use the equipment. How many of you for secular, you're in secular, you're an engineer, you're a machine operator, you're a delivery man, you're an electrician, a plumber, whatever it is you do, whatever it is, how many of you in your life, think of this, have ever gone to a training class for work purposes? Raise your hand. Every single person here has done that. My first job, I was 16 years old. My dad said, son, you're going to go get a job. I said, why? He said, you want a car? He said, you're going to. And so I went down to Albertsons, and I got my first job to bag groceries. Brethren, they wouldn't let me so much as touch a bag until I went through 2 hours of training so I don't smush the bread. Now, I don't know if they still do that or not. That's sometimes hard to tell. But in any case, I was trained. And then they trained me how to use the register. Then they trained me, and I took about every position in that store. They trained me how to work in the butcher's market. They trained me how to work in the deli. Trained me how to work in the back room. But I always go through training. I'm just 16, 17, 18 years old. And then I went to flight school, and they trained me, and they trained me. I can remember that old World War II pilot that trained me. And man, he was stern and scared me. Every time I saw him, I shook. And we were flying, and I landed the plane. He looked at me, he says, son, he says, your training's over today. I said, what's wrong? He says, he got out of the plane. He says, take off. He hit the planes on the tail. He said, it's your plane, go. Training. He put 40 hours of training in me before I was allowed to do that. Why do they train you? Why do they train you at work? So you're good at it. So you're safe. So you're efficient. We understand the value of training. Now I'm going to ask you a very penetrating question. When's the last time you guys went to a training course on what to do when a visitor walks through the door? When's the last time we went to a training course on how to greet a new mover? When's the last time we went to a training course that actually taught us, not told us, but how to knock a door? When's the last training class that taught us what to do with a new convert and how to mentor them? When's the last time we went to a training class that taught us how to conduct a Bible study? When's the last time we went to a training class that taught us how to be a silent partner? When's the last time we went to a training class that taught us how to pass out an invitation card? When's the last time we went to a training class that taught us how to write compassion cards? How to, brethren, I could just go on in my list. Here's the facts. The facts are most of us have never been to a class like that in our lifetime. I'm not talking about sermons. I know you've heard good preaching. I don't question that. But there's a difference between a sermon, a teaching sermon, and a training class. There's a big difference. A training class is actionable. It's bullet pointed. It's practical. You're doing something. You're actually going through a process. You might even role play in it. And a lot of us have sat in these pews for a long time, and we've never experienced a training class once. No wonder we don't know how to use the tools. And we're scared to death of them. I remember when the Jacksonville church, they'd asked me to start this school. I had to sell my house. I moved down to Jacksonville. And I said, Alan, I'm going to run an experiment this morning. If you'll permit me, I'm just going to put the evangelism table right in front, and they're going to have to step around it to get into church. I'm doing this on purpose. I'm not going to leave it there, but I'm going to make sure everybody bumps into it when they walk into church. So I put it right in front. I've got all the tools, back to the Bible. I've got everything sitting, a Bible sitting on there. And this is, I stood by the side, and I'm watching the brethren. Let me show you what they did. They back up, and then they look again. Some of them would touch it, and then they go around. And they sat down. They're scared to death. Had no idea what to do with it. They didn't pick it up. Not to keep it. They just looked at it. So what happens if you put training material in the foyer and you don't train them how to use it? What are they going to do? Nothing. They're going to absolutely nothing with it. And so one of the things we got to do is we got to train the membership. So if you want to train the membership how to be evangelistic, what day do you think we should select to do that? What day? Y'all talk. What day do you think would be the best day to do it? Sunday. Thank you. Why would we do it on Sunday? Anybody? That's where people are here. So we do it on Monday night, we're obviously going to lose most of our men. All right, we got to do it when people are here. Why not use the pulpit? That's a novel idea. Why not use the pulpit to train people? Why not put tools in people's hands and let's say, church, we're going to work together this morning and learn how to do something. And so we're going to call on a church to actually utilize the power of the pulpit. It used to be called the bully pulpit, all right? We're not going to call it that. We're going to use the power of the pulpit, and instead of having pew potatoes in the pews and just sit there and have passive listening, we're going to ask you to take an action. We're going to ask you to help us. We're going to engage the church members on a personal level. We're going to train the church. Number 4. We're going to make evangelism the centerpiece of the church. Jerry Jenkins was known as one of the great evangelists of yesteryear. You remember him, Doug? And he preached at a church north of Birmingham. It's one of the largest churches of Christ in America. And I've had the privilege of talking to some of those members who were younger when he was preaching there. They're still living. And it changed its name to Deerfoot Park. And at one time, it was 2,000-member church. I mean, it was a massive church. And that congregation was evangelistic. And people would ask, how did you grow? And they said, evangelism. And they said, who's responsible? And the elders would say, listen, it's Jerry. And Jerry will tell us in those elders meetings, if it's not evangelistic, you can count me out. I'm not doing it. Everything we do. And he started to have a phrase. He called it the funnel effect. He said, we're putting the funnel in the church. And everything we do is going to be evangelistic. And it's going to funnel through the funnel. And if it don't funnel through the evangelism funnel, we don't do it. And so we began to change our culture, and graduation banquets became evangelistic. Trunk or treats became fall party became, everything's evangelistic. It's all about reaching the lost in your community. And he said, Rob, before you were allowed to leave that church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, there would be a spontaneous singing. Lead me to some soul today. We sang it every time we met. How inspiring. How inspiring. Can you think about that? I mean, that church had it going because they understood that, hey, we're here to win souls. We're here to help people go to heaven. And when we walk out of this church building, the last thing on my mind is lead me to some soul today. My prayer when I start is lead me to some soul today. Got to get back to that. Carnes Church of Christ called me several years ago. They said, man, Rob, we'd like to be part of the campaigns. And we had started these local U.S. campaigns. I've done mission work all my life. I've done mission work for 30 years. I love to do foreign mission. I've led trips all over the world. And in 2020, Austin Fowler came to me as COVID was at its peak. And he said, Rob, every mission trip has been canceled. I was hired to lead mission work for Yes 2 missions out of Valdosta, Georgia. He says, we're not going anywhere. He says, why don't we do it here? He said, I've always wanted to do mission work here. Why can't we do it here? Why do we got to go to Mexico? I mean, why do we got to go to Honduras? I said, Austin, I have had the same thoughts myself. And I said, I tell you what, why don't we partner together? I said, if you'll partner with me and help me, I said, let's put together domestic mission work. So in 2021, we launched it. Our first congregation was the Oak Hill Church of Christ in Rome, Georgia, where Matt Wallen is at. And we started that, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I put out an all-points bulletin. I said, come to this church. A lot of people were still closed. Some people wouldn't get out of their house. But we put an all-point bulletin out. And I remember because we gathered about 150 Christians. We got in this auditorium. And we said, we're going to train you how to be. So I spent half the day training. The other half of the day, we went out working. And I'd never done a domestic mission. I've always been in a foreign mission. And when you do foreign missions, you all wear the same color shirt so we can find out where you're at. So we all had the blue shirts on. And we had a little red insignia. And we called it AMC, American Mission Campaigns. I don't know if you've heard of it or not because they have grown and grown and grown. So we go, I got to tell you this story. We go out in the community, right? And we're going to go and evangelize. And people, right? It's COVID, right? And so there's people watching us. There's 150 of us. And we're going up and down the streets and we're talking to people. I knocked on one door's man. He said, wait. You're not the vaccine police, are you? I said, no, sir, I'm not. He said, well, you got the blue shirts on. I've seen them on TV. Are you sure you're not here to force me to take that thing? I said, no, sir. I said, no, sir. I said, what do you want? I said, I'm just a Christian. And we gathered together that day after. I said, everybody take off their blue shirts. Don't put them back on. I said, no, not in Rome, Georgia. We're in the wrong place. And in that campaign, we baptized a half a dozen people. And since that campaign, we've had over 300 baptisms in this country doing that. I just came from Columbus, Georgia this summer, and we did it there. Columbus, Georgia is the most liberal city in Ohio. Trans flags are all over the streets. 11 baptisms. There are people who have not bowed their knee to Baal. There are people in this nation that can be reached. And brethren, if we would promote evangelism in everything we do, I'm not against going to Tanzania. Send your group to Costa Rica. But let's send some Christians right here to White Bluff. Let's prepare to evangelize your neighbor. Let's prepare to evangelize this city. Let's make sure that we promote evangelism in the works we do. Our Vacation Bible School, it's evangelism. And that Carnes church says, we want in. And I said, we're coming. Before I got to Carnes, one of those elders, and I can't remember, it may have been Brother Woodall, he says, Rob, we got a backpack drive we're going to do in this campaign. I said, yes, sir, I know. He said, we got a problem. We've done this for years. We get nothing out of it. It's a great effort. Our members work it. I mean, we've got the backpack room. We got the backpack deacon. We got the backpacks ready. He said, we don't get anything out of it. Make it evangelistic. I said, yes, sir, that's what I'll do. I thought hard on it. And as I got to that church, that deacon of evangelism, that deacon of the backpack said, well, Rob, what do you think we should do? I said, what do you normally do? He said, we put the backpacks under the awning. We got some big tubs. We line them up, get the orange cones out. People come under the awning. We give them the backpack, give them a track. We go through about 400 backpacks. I said, brother, I commend you. I mean, that takes a lot of work. Can I tweak it? He said, well, the elders told me to listen. I said, put your backpacks in the classrooms. What? I said, put them in your classroom. I said, you require the people to get out of their car and come in your church building. I said, in fact, I would like you to get every member all-point bulletin in this church building. Put them in your auditorium, and let's do an open house. And let's make sure we clean this place up. And let's make sure those teachers have beautiful classrooms. And let's make sure when they come in, we're going to tour them through those classrooms. We're going to tour them through your auditorium. We're going to tour them through this beautiful building. And we're going to take them right to the classroom where they will be attending when they come. And we're going to give them a backpack. And that teacher is going to engage that student. Then we're going to take them over to the fellowship hall where our ladies will have a beautiful dinner planned. And then we're going to sit down with them, get the contact information, and then escort them to the car. He said, Rob, he says, there's no way we can pass out 400 backpacks like that. I said, but you'll have a Bible study. And we had a Bible study that night. Brother Higginbotham, this lady right here, I still remember him coming. He's a big man. You can't miss him. He's coming at me. I said, she wants to know more about your church. She wants to study the Bible. You ought to have seen him grin. That's what he was waiting for. And we did it that day. And all we did is change the way we did backpack drives. So I don't know what it is you do in this church. But whatever it is that you do, it ought to focus on souls. If you got a benevolent work, why don't we say this? When they call, hello? Do you guys help people? Yes, sir, we help people. Well, great, I need help with my light bill. You help with light bill? Yes, sir. You help with food? Yes, sir. You help with broken down cars? Yes, sir. You pay off mortgages? Absolutely. Whatever they say. I've been looking for this church. Where can I find you? Sunday morning at 9:30, and we can't wait to meet you. Oh, no, I don't know if I can make it on Sunday morning. That's okay. We do it again at 10 o'clock. We can't wait to meet you. Now, Sunday mornings are just not good for me. I work hard. Sunday night at 6 o'clock, we can't wait. Sundays are just out for me. Don't worry. We do it again on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and we can't wait. I don't have a car. We'll pick you up. Every charlatan out there drops by. Because there's a lot of charlatans trying to take advantage of you. Bring them to your church building. Make them sit in your pews. Better yet, why don't we have a class designed for visitors because visitors don't know where to go. And those door greeters say, you're visiting, we got a special class for you. It teaches you about our church. And why do we take them to a classroom? And why doesn't the teacher have a set of back to the Bibles and we have multiple teachers? Maybe we have 4 or 5 men in that class ready to teach. And everybody that comes in that church, the first class you go to is called Back to the Bible. One year I called Mel Hutzler at Northern Oaks. I said, you got 20 baptisms every year. How do you do it? He says, we take them through the membership class. Every visitor goes to that class. I said, what do you mean? He said, every member, they don't go to the adult class, they go to that class. He said, and we study with them. He said, Rob, most of our baptisms come from that class. I was sitting with Wilma Bates. Now, Bobby's passed away. Bobby wrote Back to the Bible. I told Wilma, she said, oh, Bobby taught that all his life. Every church used to do that. Why have I never heard of that before? Why have I not heard of this before? Everything we do in our churches, from our Bible classes to our vacation Bible school to our benevolent, I could tell you, I could put it in park right here and tell you about all the ways we changed the way we did things to focus on soul. I'm not focused on dressing up like Pac-Man or Star Wars or SquarePants Bob or whoever it is. We dress up like some cartoon figure. We dress up for, where's Moses? When I went to VBS growing up, there was Moses and Daniel and Jesus and Paul. Now our VBSs look like something out of Hollywood. And we make our VBSs evangelistic. Her name was Phyllis Woodard. I sat about right here. She was right behind me. There she was. I said, ma'am, my name's Rob. My name's Phyllis. I said, Phyllis, nice to meet you. I said, you here for VBS? Yep, brought my grandchildren. I said, well, great, glad you're here, Phyllis. And she said, glad to be here. Who are you? She's pretty straightforward. I said, well, I'm the preacher. Oh, the preacher, huh? I said, yes, ma'am. Well, I sat in a good place, didn't I? I said, yes, ma'am, you did. And so my goal is to bring her to Christ. She's on my target list. I will baptize her. She's baptized and she doesn't even know it yet, Jay. I'm very determined. I work her all week long. I sit with her when we have meals. I'm talking to her, and it's to my own detriment. Some of the members I actually had this happen. They would complain because I ignored the members. I had members complain because I spent more time with visitors than I did members. And I guarantee that happened. I had one sister call me. Brother called me and said, Rob, you got to spend more time with the members. I said, what do you mean? He said, my wife won't come back because she says you snub her for the visitors. Brother, and I was 30 years, I didn't even know what the word snub meant. I had to look it up in a dictionary. So I spent all my time with Miss Phyllis. When I finished VBS, I said, Miss Phyllis, can I come visit you? She said, well, anytime, preacher. You come anytime to see me. I said, I'm coming. Watch my husband. He'll cuss you. I said, cuss me? Well, why? He said, he don't like people. I said, well, I'll come. So I left my wife at home for this first visit. I did come, and I knock on the door. She kind of peeked her head out. Oh, it's the preacher, honey. And when she opened that door, there was more smoke than oxygen coming out of that trailer. And I said, wow. And I said, come on in, preacher. And I said, whew. I come in, and there he is. He's puffing on cigarettes over there, and that's okay. And I said, I can remember my grandfather doing that. I can handle it. And so I sat down with him. I said, my name's Rob. He says, well. And I said, Miss Phyllis. So and we just talked and talked. I said, Phyllis, can I come back again? Come back anytime, preacher. So I kept coming back, and he got a little bit more friendly with me. And I did a Bible study with Phyllis, and I baptized her. But I'm not done. I'm going to baptize you next. And I tried to get in a study. He wouldn't do it. One day, Phyllis called me. She says, Rob. I said, what's wrong, Phyllis? Oh, Jack's had a heart attack. He's in the hospital. I said, where is he at? St. Thomas Midtown. I said, I'll be right there. I baptized him now. He got home. We did that study, and I baptized him. I never give up on people. When I put you on my target list, I am relentless. I am focused. It's my job to bring you to Christ, and I will. Who's on your list, brother? Who's on your list? You better make your list. I got a list. And I take that list with me wherever I go. In fact, I'll show you my list. I take it with me. Here it is. That's my list. Those are my names. I'm responsible for those people. I will bring them to Christ. I cross them off when I baptize them. We got all sorts of activities in our church. We have nothing to show for it. Rob, we got a canned good drive. We got a winter coat drive. We got a turkey drive. We got a blessing box. We got a coat room. We got a benevolent room. How many baptisms? Is that too much to ask? How many Bible studies? Well, we get out of 400 a backpack. How many Bible studies did you get? Kim Bullock was one of those that called our building, and she needed help. I said, Kim, you can get help Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. I don't have a car. We'll pick you up. We did. And we baptized her. And she's now a member. You can talk to her. She's still there. Let's go to number 5. We got to make a target list. We got a list. One of the first things I've suggested to your elders is you got to get your members making a list. Everybody needs a list. Doug said he made his list today, I think. Somebody told me that. Right there. Doug says, I got my list. Everybody needs a list. Maybe you need to put your son on that list. Maybe you need to put your father on that list. I would. Then it was my son was not. I did put my son on the list. He was 15 years old. He wasn't a Christian. And I put him on my list. And I started to focus on my son. I was losing my son because I spent all my time in the office. I went to the elders and I said, brethren, I need some time. And I knew I couldn't reach my son in my office, so I met him on the hunting field. And I knew my son loved the outdoors. And I called Shane. I said, Shane, you're a hunter. I hunt, but I don't know as much. I said, would you teach my son and I how to hunt? He said, Rob, I'll do whatever you need. He said, I got a cabin. Bring your son with me. And I spent weeks with Shane. And I spent weeks with my son. And I learned how to reach my son in the woods. He said, oh, Dad, I need to be baptized. And I took my son and I hugged him. And I said, son, that's exactly where we're going. He said, but Dad, I want to go home to do it. And I took him up to Red Bowling Springs at Willett and I baptized my son. I didn't meet my son in my preacher's office. I met my son in the woods. And I focused my life on reaching my son. If you've got someone you love that's lost, focus your life on reaching them. Don't let time get away. You never get it back, brothers. You got time now. You got time now. Make your target list. Focus on the people that are lost. Use every tool at your disposal. The church should be advertising and promoting and reaching out. House to house is a great way to advertise your church. We send it right into the mailbox of people that live here. Once they come to this church, I have never seen a better response to house than I have the last 2 weeks. I can't tell you how many elders and preachers have said, Rob, we got people coming to church, and they said, we need to go to church. They said, Rob, they got house to house, and they're coming. Promote your church. Advertise your church. Let people know you're here and you want them here. I got back from a big camp. I was gone for several weeks in Texas. Got back and Alan Webster was preaching. And he finished. And I saw a couple back there on the back pew. And I'd never seen them before. And I said, Alan, who is that? He said, visitors. I said, yes. So I got right in behind him. And when service was over, she popped up, just her. And she says, I said, ma'am, what's your name? She said, my name's Ellen. I said, well, name's Rob. She said, Ellen, where are you from? She said, I'm just down the road. I said, well, I'm a member here. You visit? Yeah, I'm a visitor. I said, well, Ellen, what'd you think of this church here today? Man, I like it. You guys are friendly. And boy, that preacher sure does love the Bible. I said, yes, Alan Webster loves the Bible. And I said, I tell you what, Miss Ellen, we got a little custom here at this church. I'm going to test you. What's my custom? What am I going to do? I'm going to take them out to eat. I said, Ellen, my wife and I would like to take you out to eat. And she said, well, that's nice. She said, well, my husband, he got a little puny. I said, can I see if we can bring him tonight? And I said, yes. They came that night. And I said, Perry, I said, I tell you what, I'll treat you guys out to any restaurant you want in Jacksonville. He said, really? I said, what's your favorite? He said, Alfina's. Here, I'll take you to Athena's. I said, no worries. We'll go to Athena's. He said, well, man, he said, Rob, if I'm going to Athena's, I want to eat. He said, can we take a rain check to Tuesday night? I said, yes. He said, I'll feel a little puny. Brethren, it'd take me till Tuesday to pay for this meal. All right? I don't ask people what restaurant they want to go to. I pick Zaxby's, okay? We're going to Zaxby, not Athena's. And so anyway, on Tuesday, we show up, right? And we're eat. I got one mission. So I'm going to go through my introductory questions, and I do. He's in pest control. Great guy, grew up in, they're both religious, denominational churches. We're going through these questions. And I got to my last question, what do you like to do? He says, I like sports. This is great. I love sports. I love it. I said, brother, I love sports. I love it. He says, I tell you what. I said, Perry, you like NFL football? He says, no, disrespectful. I don't watch them anymore. Me neither. Don't watch. Nope, disrespectful. I said, Perry, like basketball? He says, no, bunch of thugs. I don't watch basketball. You don't watch that anymore. I said, me neither, thugs. Perry, like baseball? Too slow. Running out of sport. Perry, what do you watch? It's all in the college, Rob. He said, man, got to watch that college. I said, college. I said, Perry, what team do you root for? He said, go Alabama. Oh, no. Go Alabama. Brethren, if I got to like Alabama football to get a Bible study, so be it. I don't care. Because I want a Bible study. And I will get the study. And I did. And I baptized him. I'm not done. He's got a son. His son has lost his way. He's a prodigal. Got involved in things he shouldn't. I said, Perry, could I put your son in my target list? Why? I said, I'll bring him to Christ. And we did. And I brought his wife to Christ. When I put you on my target list, I am relentless. I never give up. Just give me their name. Hey, Doug, would you help me with my son? I know you would, Doug. Brent, would you help me with my neighbor? Daniel, I got a coworker. Would you help me? These men are just waiting for you to ask. When's the last time you asked these men to help you bring someone to Christ? Aren't you just itching to do it, Doug? Advertise, advertise, advertise. Let people know what you're doing at your church. Find out what brings people. Promote, get people here. There are things in every community that, I don't know what brings people here. Is it Vacation Bible School? Does that bring them? Is it an ice cream social? Is it a frog gigging? We did a frog gigging at Willette, and we'd have frogs and puppies. Man, they come from the woodworks. And I was at Jacksonville, and they had Big Pig Day. I said, what in the world's Big Pig Day? They dig a hole, and they put a big pig in it. And I don't know how it did, but it cooks in the hole. And they actually cover it up. Y'all know what Big Pig Day is? And man, they come from everywhere. And I said, why don't we just do wieners and hamburgers? He said, no one's coming from wieners and hamburgers, Rob. Big Pig Day is when they come. I said, make the big pig. And then the next church said, I said, what brings them? They said, alligator. Bring your alligator. So they had alligator out there. More, they come for alligator. We baptized the whole family with alligator. Every issue house says this. If you contact us, we'll send you free material. You name the subject and we send it. And so this lady had selected marriage material. So we get this in the mail. She says, I want marriage material. So the secretary called me, and the secretary's name is Deborah Rice. And Deborah said, hey, Rob, the elder said that if someone contacts Jacksonville, that I'm not allowed to send material anymore. I said, no, ma'am. They told me to call you. What am I supposed to do? I said, you call me. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to hand deliver it. We've never done that before. I said, I know. That's why we haven't baptized. I said, we're going to baptize. I said, I need her name. She gave me the name, Brenda. Brenda and Daniel. So I get the material, and my wife and I go to Brenda's house. We knock on the door, and I always put my wife in the viewing area. I stand to the side. They won't open the door for me. And so they always open the door for Nicole. They will never open the door for you, Doug. I promise. Bring your wife. Bring your wife. And they open the door, and she says, hello. I said, ma'am, my name is Rob, my wife, Nicole. Oh, yes. I said, we're from house to house. You would ask for marriage material. Oh, yes, I did. You brought it? I said, yes, ma'am. Oh, that's so nice. I said, yes, ma'am. I said, we wanted to meet you. Wow, wonderful. I said, Brenda, I got to ask a question. Did you just get married? Oh, I did. I just got married. Come from Oxford. I said, well, Brenda, congratulations. Is Daniel the lucky? He is the lucky man. And I said, Brenda, how long you live here? Oh, about a month. I said, come from Oxford about a month. I said, well, Brenda, I've been here several. I said, Brenda, is there anything you need in this community? Well, yes, there is something I need. Sir, I need to find a church. I said, I know where one is. I said, I happen to know. I said, Brenda, right across over here next to the college, there's a church. Well, wonderful. You go to church? I said, yes, ma'am. Well, I've been praying about this. I need a church. And she, well, sir, you go to church a lot? I said, well, I'm faithful. Okay. I got a question for you then. I said, okay, what do you got? She said, do you know anything about the Bible? I said, ma'am, I know a little bit about the Bible. She said, good, because my husband knows nothing about the Bible. And now she changes her complete complexion. Her voice becomes raspy. Everything changes. She says, huh. She says, that man, she said, we've been married 30 days. And he goes to work all day long. He comes home, and do you know what that man does? Ignores me, gets on the couch, goes to sleep. All I want to do is talk to the man. I don't know what he's doing. He knows nothing about the Bible. Sir, would you wait right here? I said, yes, ma'am. I'll be right back. I watched her. She goes to the man and wakes him up. He's 6'4". She is pushing on this man. He goes, what? Daniel, there are visitors here to see you. Come with me. She pulls Daniel over to the door. Daniel is now sitting in front of the door with me. And this is, brethren, I promise she said this. She says, Daniel, she gets her finger up like this. She says, we're going to teach you the Bible. You could have blown me over. And there we are. We baptized every one of them. Because he's got cousins. He's got brothers. See in the top left-hand side? You remember my lesson last night about Geneva? That's her. I was told, I'll tell you something that some preachers told Alan Webster when he asked me to start this school. It would never work, so they told him. It worked for Rob just because he was out in the middle of nowhere. It won't work in Jacksonville, Alan. You make him prove it in Jacksonville. And that's what I did for the first year. I proved it. And Alan came to me and said, it's obvious it works. Go teach everybody else how to do it. I don't care where you live, it works. Evangelism works. And that's what we did. We got to learn how to knock it over. Our churches have not. Our preacher students, I was at a big preaching school, 53 students. And I asked them, I said, guys, you ever been door knocking? They all said, yes, Mr. Rob. I said, how many of you think it works? Not one person raised their hand. I said, tell me how you do it. We got flyers. We got a gospel meeting. Y'all done this before, right? The gospel meeting, the flyer, right? You know why people don't knock doors and invite people to gospel meetings? Just be honest with me. Don't hide it. Tell me. Why don't you do it? Because they don't come. It's a lot of work and nobody comes. I don't do that either. It doesn't work. Would you like to know what does work? Because I got numbers. I know it works. Role play. Open the door. Hey, my name's Rob, my wife Nicole. We're Christians, and our church is having a big prayer service Sunday. We're going to be praying for people in the community. And do you know anybody needs prayer? We're going to be praying all Sunday. And is there someone we could pray for? Your mother. What is your mother's name? Your mother-in-law. Mother-in-laws need prayer. And what is her name? Dot. And tell me a little bit about that works. I'll make a contact out of you. In fact, let's look at our list. Those are my numbers. See those percentages? Those percentages represent success. And I get success. Notice this, 30% of the time on Sunday, when I ask people if I can pray for them, they will let me do it, and they'll give me their address, and they let me come back. I got 5 strategies at the door that I use. Not one of them involves giving them a flyer and inviting them to come to the gospel meeting. That's from 1960. That's not what people do today. I'm not against gospel meetings. And I can get people to come, but that's not how you do it. Is there a number on that chart, fellas, that kind of stands out to you? A number that really just, you got to ask. You want to raise your hand right now? Doug, just ask me. Yeah, that's something. Y'all want to know how you get an 83% rate of return when you knock a door? I'll tell you. I've done it all over the country. I did it in Covington, got 77% in Covington. That's just north of Memphis. I don't believe that's more than an hour and a half from you. Maybe a couple hours, maybe a little further. New movers. New movers. New movers are a very effective tool. At house to house, we have the name and address of every person who moves into this community. We know where they live, and I know their name. And if I were to train you what to say at the door, you'll get about a 75% return rate. If you are not trained, you'll never do it again. You'll tell me it doesn't work. You'll tell me the people are angry. You'll tell me they slammed the door, they cussed you. You're going to tell they quizzed you down because you've never been trained. If I train you, you won't have that happen. How important is training? Jay, how important was it in your job? Very. Brethren, I've run out of time. I think the ladies have finished, and I'm not allowed to finish before my wife, because I've always got to be the long-winded guy. And thank you. I love you, brothers. I did not come here to belittle you in any way, but it was told to me by an old preacher one day. He said, son, never forget your job. Your job is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. May God bless you to reach as many people as possible. Thank you.